Hello and welcome to B Shifter. John Vance, your host here. On today's episode, we have Nick Brunacini, Josh Blum, and we are talking about the Mayday help order. It's been on our minds a lot lately with Blue Card and B Shifter, the anatomy of a Mayday, how to prevent them. We've been talking about that at our Mayday management workshop, and we want to give a glimpse on what the Mayday help order looks like. So we'll talk about that on today's episode of B Shifter. Thanks for being here. All right, we're with Josh and Nick, and we've been talking a lot about Maydays, especially since we've got our Mayday management workshops going on in Phoenix, which you could still maybe sign up for one if you go to bshifter.com. Check that out. But one of the things that people get surprised about, or folks who don't know Blue Card, is our Mayday help order. What exactly does that look like? Because it is custom to what is actually happening in the field. It's not theoretical. It actually addresses the percentages of how Maydays get resolved from what we've seen, and we've just reinforced that with this Mayday help order. So where does that begin, Josh?
So I think the Mayday help order began really in March of 2001 when Brett Tarver died, and Phoenix Fire Department took a very in-depth look at why did that happen and spent 4 or 5 years dissecting the whole event, figured out a better way. So that's where it really started. I know that's not what you were looking for with that piece, but that's where it started.
Mm-hmm. Well, prior to that, it was RICs. That was the help order. Somebody had a Mayday. You had a RIC team, and we would establish that very early, and they were supposed to deal with that emergency. And then as time went on and we figured out, we had more experience with RIC crews and their use and when you deploy them and what they do, is the RIC teams themselves started feeling very lonely because most incidents don't have a Mayday. In fact, almost all of them don't have a Mayday, and they would stand there. So it became a deal where it was less about rescuing somebody that could get into trouble, that I have to be this RIC crew and stand in the front yard now. So just the whole approach. And then, like Josh said, when Southwest Superbarcus happened, well, we had 3 or 4 RIC teams that were inside the building trying to get Tarver. Now, the problem is they got Tarver when he was still alive, and it was the crews that went in with him to begin with. When they figured out he's still stuck in the building, they all turned around, went back in, found him, could not rescue him. They were all out of air. It was the end of the thing. It was so, like Josh said, that left us with a major problem with our rapid intervention system. In fact, Steve Kreis, the chief of operations at the time, after the first set of drills, said, "This really looks like we're just practicing the wrong thing a lot harder." This is it didn't work there. It doesn't work in training. And it's good intentions. It was a good idea, but it just in practical application didn't work. And that's where the help order was born. Is, well, what does work? And then that's what we were left with.
Yeah. So the help order starts with the incident commander. When that firefighter says Mayday, 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 and they give, through a CAN report or whatever your firefighter is using, whatever information comes out, who they are, where they are, what they need, how much air they maybe have, the incident commander starts to talk to them first. It's the acknowledgement of them calling the Mayday and then trying to get that firefighter that's having a problem to help themselves. So, example, if they're lost, just communicating with them, hey, we're coming to get you. What's your air supply? Slow down your breathing. Do you have a thermal imaging camera? Because if you have one of those, it might help you find a window or door, hose line, exit, something. And then going through, whatever other steps apply to that particular event. And then if it applies, telling them to activate their pass device so that we hear that from crews inside, which brings us to the next step of we've talked to the firefighter, and then we use companies inside to help solve the problem and locate that firefighter if they're lost. So when that firefighter activates their pass device, companies inside that might be in that area are going to hear that. So command, Or if you have a tactical boss in place, talking to interior companies and assigning them to firefighter Smith is missing. He's activated his pass device. He was on the orange hand line. Do you hear a pass device? And if a company hears that, yeah, we hear it. And then maybe assigning them to find that firefighter. So the quicker we can find a lost firefighter inside the building, the quicker we can help that firefighter reorient themselves and possibly exit the building. And it's much easier to find somebody who knows where they are because they're with somebody else who found them than it is to find somebody who's just lost, point of no return inside of a building, which is the whole air supply piece then that we probably need to get air to that person if depending on what the radio report was. I mean, if they were low on air when they called and said they had a problem, then we need to send air inside the building to start the process to assist them. So, I mean, that's just a lost firefighter. But if we have a firefighter, just another example, we have a firefighter that's entangled in wires. We'll just say, there was a ceiling collapse, firefighters entangled in wires, and the company officer called the Mayday. We're on the second floor. We got a firefighter entangled in wires. We need some heavier cutters and air transfill equipment. We're all below 50% air. And let me throw this in. We have fire control. Well, as the incident commander, I feel pretty good about the fire because you said fire control. I feel good about that. What we're running up against now is time because of air supply. So in that case, I've talked to the company officer. I acknowledge that. I make sure the company officer stays with that fireman, keeps that going. They're working on getting that firefighter free. And then we send that on deck crew from the outside in with the appropriate equipment. In this case, some kind of heavier cutters and air to the known location where we know they are because we talked to that company officer. And that helps the process because somebody is already there with them and it's starting. And we're not losing as much time as we were in the past when it was just sending a company in from the outside to try to find, somebody who was at the point of no return that's just lost inside this building. We have an idea of where they're located and a company can go directly to them.
So looking at the latest stats, we're less than 9% of the time that it's from the outside in. So less than 9% of the time. Am I correct on that? It's actually a rapid intervention team or somebody, an on-deck team coming in that actually affects the rescue. It's usually from the inside out. Is that right?
Yeah. So if we look at all of the Project Mayday stuff and even other information that's coming from some other people who are tracking some Mayday information and teaching rapid intervention skills, and they're tracking that back, most of the problems are solved from the inside out. And at a bare minimum, it starts on the inside and starts to solve the problem. So that's a benefit to us that we're starting to solve it from the inside out because we're not losing that time from that company deploying from the outside. And though we always said, you're not the save all, end all, this isn't a suicide mission, it kind of turned into a suicide mission for them because it was like, we're counting on you to pull off almost the impossible. So in our system with on deck, they are first and foremost the rapid intervention crew, and they're outside waiting to be assigned, multiple things, but they're first and foremost a rapid intervention crew, and then they could be assigned to assist in many other ways to solve the problem, which keeps us from having, that's Mayday prevention, that keeps us from having the problem. So even though the problem starts to be solved from the inside, it's not that we don't use companies from the outside to assist with firefighter removal or bringing in tools or bringing in the Stokes basket or bringing in that air supply, but no Maydays are created equally. So they're all different. They all have their own set of critical factors, but irregardless, we start with that help order, and it starts with the firefighter helping themselves inside the building. If that doesn't work, we go to the firefighter's company. What can they do? And if that's not working, we go to another company operating inside the building. What can they do? And the next piece of it is sending that on deck company in from the outside to find that crew. But most often we use the on deck crew or on deck crews to assist with bringing in tools and then the final firefighter removal, not finding that person and starting to solve the problem.
And I think as a disclaimer, we should say there's still rapid intervention skills. It's just not an assignment that you're always going to have rapid. There's a difference between saying this is the rapid intervention crew and it actually being skills that are carried out, right?
Yeah. I mean, they call it rapid intervention, and rapid intervention should be a crew that's ready to go right now at the entry point to help to solve the problem. Rapid intervention isn't when you're running around the building, softening the building, putting up ground ladders, cutting off window bars, doing another 360, all of those things. When it's cost and time, they're not ready to go. And that's something that was a takeaway from the whole recovery process with Brett Tarver, is how long did it take companies to deploy when they were the rapid intervention crew, when they were maybe doing some other skills or some other things, or they missed radio traffic. So with the on deck whole piece, crews are going to be engaged because they know that they're the next one to be assigned, not just to stand there and be rapid intervention, but if a company says they need another hand line, then they're going to get that assignment as long as it's in that sector division. Or if they need whatever support they need, they're going to be the next one to sign. So when we do on deck, it's not maybe just one company on deck. We have a tactical reserve that aligns and matches with how much work is actually happening inside the building too. So we could have multiple companies on deck and in that tactical reserve position, instead of having one crew that we were relying on outside that were doing all these other skills, and we were thinking that they were going to go inside and solve the problem.
See, I think that's part of the problem, is when we developed rapid intervention, is we thought we can compartmentalize a firefighter mayday. Because we said, okay, the first thing that happens when there's a firefighter mayday is the radio explodes. Because everybody has a plan on how we're going to fix this. I worked for a fire department that in 1983 had a close call in a sprinkler-controlled fire. Our reaction to that, or the leadership's reaction to it, was to, in the event that there was a working fire declared at any point, an extra unit would be dispatched to the scene, and their only job would be to be the rapid firefighter rescue crew in the event of a mayday. It doesn't work like that. It's not an efficient system at all, because what happens is, okay, rapid intervention is not an assignment to a task level unit. It's the capability shared by the entire response. So when we talk about the help order, well, the mayday starts usually on the inside of a burning building. So then you start drawing a series of circles around the firefighter or crew having the mayday. Well, that's your help order. So it's first, help yourself. Secondly, you're part of a crew, so your crew should help you. Well, part of that with us was, Tarver was lost. That's what happened to him. As we were dicking around inside defensive fire conditions that day, that's what they were doing, with 1.5-inch lines. And they ran themselves out of air, and they came off the attack line. They took too much line in, so they did a set of things that cursed them when everything went to shit. So there were too many. See, it's like critical factors. Is it Southwest Supermarkets? There were literally thousands of critical factors falling out of the sky. The big ones are, the building's going to burn down. Ain't nothing you can do to stop it. Come get your guy. I dare you. So there was too much happening, and the flywheel blows up on the operation. So then it becomes every firefighter for themselves at that point. So we come out of Southwest Supermarkets fully understanding what that looked like. The smartest thing our fire chief ever did in his career that I was there is all of us had to walk through that building. That changed everything for our organization. There were no more doubters or naysayers, and if there were, they were dismissed and put into a closet somewhere while the rest of us could go to work trying to fix it. So that's where the help order was born, was out of that. And we started going down that road doing drills and the rest of it. And then you would start running into safety officers and RIT instructors at these classes we were having and talking about what happened at the thing. And they all were having cows over this. No, you can't stop doing this, and this is so important. You think, well, yes, it is, but not in the way that you see it happening. This isn't an individual assignment. Like, this was going to be a bunch of people's in to be rescue squad firefighters. No, I'm Rit and I got a pin and a patch and a tattoo and I take care of my brothers and blah, blah, blah. I think that don't work like that, pal. So that's really kind of was where Blue Card was born. We thought, no, this Rick thing don't work. The first people, I said it earlier, the first people to put their hands on Tarver were the crews that went in with him in the beginning. They knew where he was. They'd been with him. Let's go get him. The Rick crews were all doing rope searches and searches off lines and fucking running out of air 150 feet into a defensive fire. The Rick crews were sending maydays 5 minutes after they went in the building. So that's the other thing. It's like a rapid intervention crew isn't a robot that can go in and save us in hostile conditions like that. So the Ritz teams have got to somehow fight through the same shit that caused the mayday in the beginning of the thing. So if it was something that happened because the building collapsed or you got trapped by wires or whatever it is, that's why in extended rescue operations, it's normal to get a mayday from the rescuers having their own issues. So it ain't a pleasant experience. That's why we say prevention. It's 99-cent prevention, and in the event that you have a mayday because you were preventing it, is it something you can recover from and get out of its way before it kills you?
I would say looking back in the late 90s and early 2000s too, and I was on a couple of aggressive departments, either we would assume that we had rapid intervention set up because there was a team assigned. We could do a whole bunch of stupid stuff because they're going to come in and save us if we get in trouble. So our safety system was way out of whack on the interior to begin with, or we were so short-staffed that by actually staffing that RIT team meant that we had other things on the fire ground not getting done. I mean, we would just ignore other things that were essential to a safe operation.
Well, and it started to become out of control. It's like the RIT thing became its own deal. So it became almost its own industry overnight almost. It didn't take that long. And you would run into people and say, no, if you have a working fire, you need 3 engines and a ladder as your RIT team. And you're like, you're going to pull 4 pieces of frontline equipment out of service to stand by? So now you got the kid that falls in the pool, and I had the unit that normally would have responded to that is now standing with their thumb up their ass as a RIC team in front, putting a tarp down so they could put all the extrication tools on it. Just in case. No, what are you doing? Go in and put the fire out, man. If you put as much effort into fire control as you did this other silly dress-up game you want to play on the outside, you wouldn't need it at that point. So an ounce of fire control is worth a pound of mayday prevention.
And if you wind up at a scene that you have bars on the windows or a structure that needs to otherwise be forced open or whatever, how do you deal with that?
Well, it's an assignment, so prior to RIT or RAT or FAST or whatever it was, that was simply an assignment. And then this whole RIT, RAT, FAST thing morphed into its own thing, like Nick said before, that it became something else. And then people made it like, oh, we're a special company and we do whatever we want. Well, all of those things of softening the building, putting up ground ladders, hey, cut these window bars off, it's support work that comes from truck companies. So it's an assignment. Command a ladder 4. I want you to put up some ground ladders on the Charlie side and cut off those window bars. When you're finished, let me know. It's as simple as that. Not, we're going to cut all these window bars off for the next 20 minutes and put up 37 ground ladders over the next 10 minutes. And by now your fire's out, or the fire's getting much bigger because we were putting up all these ground ladders and we really needed another hand line to just put the fire out.
Or here's another one. Activate the RITs. Well, during the Southwest supermarket, what they needed was ventilation, because you have 25,000 square foot grocery store with smoke and heat to the floor. It's too hot in here to operate. We boom, boom, boom. They had ladder crews trying to cut the roof off the thing. The next form of ventilation was taking out the glass in the front. What happened after they opened the roof and took all the glass out in the front? You lost the alpha side of the building with a flashover. You could no longer access the building because the giant windows in the front were full of flame. So what happens is you get into a situation where there are no choices or options to make it better. Everything I'm going to do is going to make this worse somehow in my effort to try to make it better. So, and normally, once that happens, a couple minutes later, the roof collapses. See, again, we got to tour a building where the roof didn't collapse, so we could dick around in it. If it would have collapsed, we would have put 16 people in the ground a week later. And then your fund meter gets pegged. So you start going out and doing this, and then you have these people that have been at a half a fire in their life telling you what rapid intervention is. You think, this is not the Buffalopagus Fire Department anymore, where we get to exercise our toxic masculinity as a shampoo every day.
So for departments who are trying to develop Mayday SOG or SOP, and they're not necessarily blue card right now. Of course, we're going to say, let's get the blue card. But what other tools are out there right now? Or if it's a firefighter or junior officer listening and they need to come up with some information on how this actually works, what are some resources for them?
So the IAFF Safety and Fireground and Survival Program has the exact same thing in it about the help order for the most part. It's still the help order. Their whole program is based on don't get yourself into trouble. If you get yourself into trouble, how do you get out of trouble? How does your company help you get out? It's the same thing. It's the help order. And then if you can digest it and spend the time on it, that whole project Mayday there's tons of information in there to look at. But we have a really good SOP. We have something that's clearly working, is being used all across not only the country but the world. And the biggest thing comes down to, you better focus on trying to prevent the Mayday from happening, because when it does happen, you better be doing everything right when something goes wrong. And that's the only way you're going to have any success. And we've talked about it before. When that firefighter crawls through the front door and falls through the floor into the fire, our success is usually not very good. We can usually solve task level Maydays. A ceiling collapsed, they're entangled in wires, a firefighter got lost, firefighter fell down some steps, firefighter's injured, firefighter's having a medical emergency. When the building or the fire gets on us, we don't do very well. And then they become strategic.
There's some Maydays that you will not recover from. If you have a strategic Mayday, it's going to kill you immediately. It's a body recovery. That's what it turns out being. That's why it's so important to manage the strategy throughout the event. It's Alan Brunacini. That was his deal the whole time. He knew this because the Phoenix Fire Department killed him early in his career doing this kind of stuff. In fact, when he retired, the new fire chief said, I think the reason the old fire chief was so safety conscious is because he kept getting killed in the line of duty, it seemed, at these fires they would go on in the 50s and 60s. So enough of those near-death experiences, and that kind of fueled them to, no, this ain't working.
So the difference between a strategic and a task level Mayday, just for people who are just kind of getting into this and they don't know the difference.
So a task level Mayday, really, most of the time we were doing everything right, and we're operating in ideation. Shit's still going to happen. So, we're inside the building and the ceiling, part of the ceiling collapse, drywall collapses, something falls through, HVAC unit falls through, whatever. It's task level. We can work through that. And all of it is focused on our ability to put the fire out. If we're not putting the fire out, it's a loser most of the time. We don't do very well. So let's focus on putting the fire out, and we can keep things task level. So, again, the task level Maydays, something collapses on them, we can deal with that. Medical emergency inside, we can deal with that. Firefighter lost, but they're doing everything right. They made sure their bottle was full this morning. They were leaving the building when they were doing air management. They didn't wait till their bell was ringing or they were almost out of air. We can solve that. But, we can have a strategic Mayday with air management when a firefighter isn't doing everything right and his company officer is not doing everything right. And they get to where their bell is going off, and then they get lost, and then it becomes line of duty death because they got lost in this building. But there was an opportunity to fix that by the firefighter and the company officer, because if they were just doing air management, they just waited. They just wait too long. So they're not doing everything right. And then when something happens, there's no chance. You have a very small window to try to fix it because we're running out of time. So that's the task level piece. But the strategic piece is like literally when the fire gets on us, we're in the wrong strategy, or we're in the wrong strategy and the building, comes on us. So failure to recognize some critical factors in my part of the world, basement fires. There's been far too many line of duty deaths with firefighters falling into the basement. In most cases, failure to recognize those critical factors that the fire is in the basement and we fall into that raging inferno. And the chances of us being successful on that when that happens to the first company is not good.
Southwest Supermarkets was a task level Mayday. That's what started it. Now, it just happened to occur when the IC went defensive. So they've been at the scene for 15, 20 minutes, whatever it was. They've engaged the fire several times. And now they figured out where the fire is and that they're not going to put it out using the offensive strategy. You're not going to put it out with the tack lines. You're not going to put it out with master streams. It's going to burn for the next couple hours. That much you're going to do about that. So IC, give me emergency traffic, going defensive, everybody out. Tarver's company gave a par. When the officer came out, just based on the conditions and the way we operated back then, he thought he got all of his kittens out and they just split when they got outside because that's what we would do. Okay, ollie, ollie, I'm free, they run off. So Tarver comes back and says, no, I'm still in the building, come get me. So now you're having to do a Mayday operation in a defensive fire in a grocery store. So that's strategic now. Now I have a strategic level Mayday. And the IC knew it. So at one point in the command post, they had said that he is dead and this is a body recovery and we've got 16 people inside and the attic is fully involved. And this is the last push to get him out. He's not out here. We're finished. So the last push, they got him out. And 10 minutes later, everything fell in. So now you had a fire that went over an hour in the attic of this grocery store. And the reason that it didn't collapse is it was made out of gigantic I-beams, basically. So you had a steel roof structure and not a wooden one, which would have been on that model of building in that era. I mean, I think what it was the end of the Second World War. They had a bunch of leftover steel. And they didn't know what to do with it. It hadn't made it to California to make a ship. And they said, we'll make a grocery store in Phoenix with it. So, I mean, we didn't get a lot of steel being used in the 40s in roof construction here. So that's a strategic Mayday. If the strategy's wrong, if it's defensive conditions and you've got offensive firefight and that building starts, like Josh says, either to flash over or to fall on top of you, everybody assigned to that hazard zone is at risk of being injured or killed. When
we look back in time, we'll talk about it on another podcast down the road, but there's been plenty of fires that started out offensive. The fire department was doing exactly what every fire department would do. And the failure to recognize we should have changed strategies. And then we start having Maydays, and most of those result in, Nick, as you kind of alluded to, Phoenix, lucky they didn't kill 16 people. Mm-hmm. But when we look back on some of these other events, they've resulted in multiple line of duty deaths. So that's fair to recognize that we might have started in the offensive strategy, but we shouldn't still be in the offensive strategy. But we keep pushing. That first Mayday happens, and it's too late, and then that becomes strategic. And most of those in commercial buildings result in multiple line of duty deaths. Well,
and the other piece that Abbott, the Mayday study, uncovers and brings to light is they weren't fatalities. Is some of them is you just are so injured you're never going to return to work again. And there's maybe 4 or 5 more of those than there are the just being killed outright at the incident.
Yeah, we definitely need to bring that to light. We've talked about that on a couple other podcasts, that we talk about line of duty deaths, and there's not as many line of duty deaths in buildings maybe as there was in the past, but we need to take a deeper dive and look at how many firefighters are being hurt and never coming back to work, permanent disability, because that matters too.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, it does. In fact, in some ways, I mean, financially, that's more expensive, basically. As you got the long-term repercussions from that, the human suffering that goes, the physical human suffering that the member experiences for the rest of their life. And, you know, the problem with this, and it's hard to separate ourselves from it, but when most of those type of incidents occur, the value of the property that we're protecting is zero, and there are no lives at stake. All this happens after all clears and the rest of it. Life safeties. Southwest Supermarkets, we had all clear on that entire, the exposures and the grocery store, 20 minutes before the world fell on us.
Help order. It works. We're going to continue talking about it. Nick and Josh, thanks.
Thanks, John Vance.
And that wraps up today's Bee Shifter. If you'd like to get in touch with Nick Brunacini, Josh Blum, or myself, check out the show notes. You'll find our contact information there. If you have any information you'd like to share about Maydays that your department has experienced, we're always looking for that so we can share your knowledge with the rest of the Bee Shifters out there. We appreciate you being here today. Until next time, please be safe.